Hello, hello, hello. Greetings, Light It Up TV family. This is your host, Cheryl, and we are here for another episode of Talk About It Tuesday. Listen, tonight's episode is one we really want to make sure that we bring awareness to. September is Suicide Awareness Month, and we are focusing on youth suicide prevention and awareness. Okay. So this is going to be a good one. I want you to go ahead and share this video out. If you are joining, go ahead and share it out. I'm going to do the same to let everyone know we are live. Okay. If you are joining us, let everyone know we are live. We are live. Okay. Thank you so much. I want to remind you, if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go ahead and do that. And also, please like this video because it lets YouTube know that you are interested in the content that we are providing. Okay, so go ahead and like this video, share it. And guess what? We do have a new episode of Find Your Voice Friday that will be showing on this Friday, September 27th. We will have our kids and you get to hear from them. It's so exciting to have the kids on as they're sharing their voices and they're getting in tune to sharing their voices and their feelings and their ideas and just getting just really good with talking about different topics. So it's going to be good. So join in, get your family, get everyone involved. Let them sit down. Let you all sit down with some popcorn and you all join in. All right. So I'll give it about maybe 30 more seconds so that we can let everyone know that you can let everyone know that we're live. Okay. All right. All right. So if you are on, please say hello to me. Let me know who you are. Let me know that you're here with me. Let me know that you are here. Okay. Let me know that you are here. Say hello, hello, hello to me. We'll let everyone know we are live. We are live only on YouTube. Only on YouTube. All right. Let's see. We are live. Join us. All right. This is your host, Cheryl. Another episode of Talk About It Tuesday. We're going to go ahead and bring our guest up, and that is Mr. Taurus Sanders. Okay, a licensed counselor. We've had him on before. Welcome back again to another episode of Talk About It Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you for
I
having me. I
appreciate
appreciate it.
it. Yes,
Awesome.
yes. It is always a blessing to have you on because the insight that you gave, you were providing some deep therapy the last time everyone was talking about the episodes,
That's
and
awesome.
I felt like I was in therapy, Taurus. so
Well, you did share some
so
things, so yeah, of course. Of course.
yeah. So we are going to jump right in. If you are with us, our topic tonight is youth suicide prevention and awareness. And if you have any questions for our host, go ahead and drop them in the comments section. Okay, we want to make sure that we get all our questions answered, and we want to just engage. We want to just talk about this topic for a few moments while we're here. All right, so as we shared, our September is Suicide Awareness Month, and we wanted to we're going to be focusing on youth suicide prevention and awareness. So tell us, Taurus, for the ones that may be new to you and to our podcast, let us know who you are and what is it that you do.
All right. So, like you mentioned earlier, I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm actually in private practice. I'm owner of Integrity Counseling and Wellness here in Columbia. And I've been practicing now for a little over 11 years, going on 12 at the beginning of January. So I see a range of clients from adolescents on, through adults for various, problems or issues.
Awesome. So, what is the youngest that you see?
The youngest client I think I've seen since I've been practicing is probably 6, I believe. Um, I usually don't
Wow.
see
Okay.
young clients anymore, but I tend to get a few here and there depending
Okay.
on the situation.
Okay. Okay. And then adults, there is no cap. Is
Right,
that right? There's no
right,
age
right.
cap for adults. That you
Absolutely.
All right, I see Michelle is on. I had to switch sections, you all. I couldn't see your comments. So, hey, Michelle. Hey, Charity. Hey, Denise. Thank you all so much for joining us. If you are just joining in, please share this video out and let everyone know that we are live for this important topic that we just want to bring awareness to for a few moments. Okay, if you're just joining me, say hello to us. Let us know who you are. All right, so Mr. Taurus, let's just go ahead and get into it. Our as we're talking about, and I was researching and looking up information. Our topic is youth suicide prevention and awareness. And one of the things that I saw that was very alarming that I had no clue uh, is that the it says suicide was the second leading, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
among deaths of our youth. But the other alarming thing is it went as young as 10, from ages 10 to 24. Now, is that new data or is that something that has been?
No, that's pretty consistent. Even before 2020, I think the most recent data um, that you will find is like from 2020 to to present, but it even goes beyond that as far as it being the second leading cause. So the first leading cause is what you would typically expect is unintentional injuries or accidents. Um, and so suicide just comes in second next to homicide.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. And so, what would be when you think about, and I want to ask to our audience, please share, um, please ask any comments, any questions that you have, share any comments on this. But I want to ask, what are some of the main reasons that when you're thinking about someone as young as 10, I know that's a gap, right? When you're looking at 10 to age 24, what would be some of the main reasons why someone as young as 10 would be considering suicide?
Well, I think it's pretty consistent with even what we see in adults. And for kids in particular, it is associated with identity issues and social issues in terms of um, peer engagement or peer conflict, or with the identity, how they see themselves, or um, they're trying to find out who they are, and that involves like the peer interactions and sometimes the judgments or the criticism or the fear of the people's opinions, that plays a big role in it. Also, relationships itself.
Hmm.
I've had several of adolescents suicide was influenced by breakups, relationships that didn't go well. But I also want to make a distinction here. So it's no coincidence that September is Suicide Awareness Month. And that is because of where we're entering into when it comes to October, November, December, January, and even now February. And typically, what's associated with those months is what we call
Hmm.
seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is kind of the acronym that we use. And basically, because the biological part is because there's less
You,
sunlight.
I saw that and I didn't know what that was.
Yeah. So the sunlight and we not having as much exposure to it, it does have an effect on our mood, or it could have an effect on our mood. And so that's something that we notice, the increase in suicide attempts and also successful suicides. So this is why we're kind of targeting the month to get ahead of you know the season for suicide, if you will. So I just wanted to point that out too.
Mm, yeah, that is a really great point. that you made, and I know it's a little lag, but that is a really great point that you made about the season change and the season that we are going into and how it can affect, and I guess a lot with adults, but maybe also
Mhm.
with children as well that maybe have dealt with uh, some type of trauma. And
Yes.
we, as we were talking, this that is a good question. Have anyone else ever heard of SAD? Seasonal affective disorder. Has anyone else ever heard of that? Thank you. That's a great question. Let us know. Have you heard of that? In audience, let us know. Have you ever heard of SAD, seasonal affective disorder? Now I see that Michelle talked about, oh, Michelle said she has talked about bullying and cyberbullying being some of the reasons why a child would, especially I guess a youth around that age, would consider would have thoughts or consider suicide. Michelle also says sunlight definitely puts her in a better mood, and it lets her and causes her to have more energy. And it's the same with our youth as well, Taurus, as you were just saying in terms of the seasonal affective disorder. But I have a question: is the reasons different from maybe that teens than the young adults? The reasons, are they maybe different, or they are about synonymous?
They're about the same, actually. It's usually those main two components. You know, things
Mm-hmm.
interpersonally, how they feel and think about themselves, and then the social relationships and how they interact and engage socially. Those tend to be the two main things that kind of influence suicide. And, you know, there's a lot
Okay.
of
Okay.
mystery surrounding suicide because, um, we would like to think that there's things we can do, to get ahead of it. But a lot of suicide is impulsive. There is no planning out. There is no, weeks or months into it. It's usually sometimes a person just makes a very split decision based on the situation or the problem that they're in. And the hopelessness based on the situation is usually what feeds it. Um, and what really kind of gets people in trouble
Mm.
is when they get into the place of despair and they believe that this problem is inescapable. So when a person gets to that point, when they get that thought in their mind, that is the most convincing part about
Mm-hmm.
how people, follow through with suicide. So I just
Mm-hmm.
want to kind of make a distinction. There's a difference between when someone's contemplating it for a while because of a long-term problem or a problem that they're trying to, work through, and it's just not, it's not getting any better, it's not changing, versus somebody that has a sudden problem and it just becomes very overwhelming and they just get into very negative or dark space with it. So it's two at least two sides to it. That's what I'm kind of explaining.
Okay. So the hopelessness, and the overwhelming feelings. I see that a lot of people said they have heard of the SAD, and some people say they have not heard of a SAD. You have a question that says, "Do the holiday season play a role in it?" And then I'll get back to what you said. Someone wants to know, do the holiday seasons, can that does that play a role in the
Ab-
suicide
Absolutely.
rate, and I guess the
Absolutely.
suicide thoughts and feelings and maybe attempts?
Absolutely. I mean, most people think of holidays as a happy, fun and,
I know.
you know, positive kind of time of the year. But actually, for a lot of people, it is not because they don't have a um, healthy, or they don't have a relationship with their family. And so they're isolated or they're not engaged or interacting with family around those holidays. So those people tend to kind of be alone or um, uh, just kind of be isolated to themselves. And that, kind of fuels or feeds into the depression. So unfortunately, the holidays isn't good for everybody. On top of it being that time of year you know, with the sunlight issues and things like that.
Okay. So yes, so Ajada, thank you for that question. I know there may be a little delay, you all. I'm having a little technical issues, but we're going to keep going on this topic. Ajada, thank you for asking that question in terms of, does the holiday season play a role in that? If you've ever, I have a question that I want you to share with us, that if you have dealt with a youth that has dealt with thoughts of suicide, what were their reasons and how are they helped? Okay. So if you do, you know of a youth who has dealt with thoughts of suicide, and what were the reasons and how were they helped? So Brother Tars, one of the things that when you said that about the impulsiveness, if that is, which we know that most suicide, as you were saying, is impulsive. No one just wake up and say, oh, this is what I'm, this is what I'm gonna do next week or whatever. It's normally, like you said, an impulse feeling. And if that is the case, when do we start teaching would it be a case of coping skills around different traumas, or is that something that would help, especially you talking about 10, 11? I read one where it says 10 to 14 was a I guess a high rate, and then I mean there may be brackets,
There
but
are.
would we be would it be good to teach coping skills? And then if so, when would what would that look like and when?
So yes, I mean, typically we think of coping skills when we talk about these kind of problems, but we have to be very aware of what coping skills are. And the best way to understand or describe coping skills is they're enduring skills. To cope means to endure, to make it through, to work through situations or problems. It doesn't mean that there's a resolution in the coping. Coping just means to kind of get to a solid ground or a foundation to then begin to work or to transition to a better place. Um, so coping skills for kids are different because they're still learning, they're still developing. There's a lot of social things and values and beliefs and morals that parents should be or have been instilling at this point. And when you talk about suicide, one of the things that we, at least in the counseling world, is we try to say, okay, what are your values and what is it that would keep you from not committing suicide? So sometimes it's my faith, it's my family, or a parent, or somebody specifically, a relationship. And so it's those things that we have to make sure that our kids understand that they have in terms of support, or something that's really a solid um, resource for them. Because otherwise, when people begin to get in those thoughts of contemplating in the hopeless realm, they're not thinking about those resources, they're not thinking about the values and all that stuff. So we got to make sure that our kids understand
Mm.
the importance of values, like the value of life, the value of relationships, and the value of themselves and how people value them in relationships, um, and the impact it would have if they were feeling or were attempting to do this kind of harm to themselves. Those are things that we have to make sure that they understand, because when they're in the space by themselves, the arguments that have been made has to prevail, right? Otherwise, they'll get overwhelmed and
Mhm.
and struggle with that.
That's good what you said, because I didn't think about that. You're right. Once they get to that point, is they're not thinking about the things that they've been taught, the enduring skills ahead of time. They're not thinking about that. I see we have some comments where Charity said we see that a lot in healthcare, ERs and clinics. They become frequent flyers or have a lot more sudden acute sickness just to be out the house and around people.
Hmm. Yeah. So I don't think I shared this before, but part of my professional experience, I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and
Oh, wow.
most of the patients that came in were because of attempted suicides. And you know, you have to be very careful because um, there's people that are very serious about their attempts to end their life, and there's some people that kind of what Charity was alluding to, we call it attention seeking sometimes. Like they just want to know that somebody
Mhm,
cares about them, and they want to see that somebody's responding to them, or they're concerned about
mhm,
whatever the issues that they are. And so they
mhm,
use an extreme act like suicide attempt to do that. And so
mhm,
you got to be careful how we vet that out, who's really serious and who's not, per se. And we know statistically that men are more successful at committing suicide than women are, but women attempt suicide more than men do, because of the nature of how they go about trying to do it. Um, but a lot of times people do not reach out when they're really serious about suicide. They don't call, they don't text, they kind of leave a note maybe, and sometimes they don't even do that. But there are those times where people are just like, they're so hurting and they just want somebody to understand, and you know to show some concern or some sort of validation, that they would
mhm.
have an attempt like suicide to do that.
So what would be some of the, when you're thinking about, because I know, as like you just said, with adults and probably youth, they, as you said, they may, when they get to that point, if they're really serious, they're not going to call or reach out. So what are some of the things that, as a parent or a guardian or aunties, godparents, that are around children, caregivers, teachers, what are some of the things that youth leaders, what are some of the things that, if a child is not vocal, if they're not saying it, what should we be looking, would be a signal to, because as I was reading, it taught, and help me out with this, right? That a lot of times it's from some type of, maybe if not mental battle,
Hmm.
some type of mental illness, some type of depression, and normally as a result of some type of, I guess, traumatic event, whether it's divorce or loss of a loved one, or something very, loss of a sibling, something very, that's traumatic, especially to someone that age, right? So,
Right.
what are, if they're not saying it, what are things that we need to be aware of?
So first is the behavioral things, because the behavior really indicates the reality of most situations. The challenge is with this generation, they're already isolated, and that's become sort of a normalized thing. Like they're in their rooms a lot, they're on video
Mhm.
games. They're not really
Mhm.
interacting
Mhm.
as much with parents and family,
Right.
like and maybe they're talking to their friends. So that's a
Mhm.
challenge with this generation, because that's usually one of the first signs. Like they're withdrawn, they're not as engaged,
Mhm.
they're not as talkative.
And
But I
how
would,
could you tell the difference, right? Because
right,
if
right.
this is like the norm, you don't want to make a big, deal out of that. But so how would someone be able to tell that difference to somebody that's maybe depressed versus this is just what this generation does?
Well, I think, just asking some of the basic questions, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Are you okay? How are things going? Um, Sometimes using the open-ended questions versus the yes and no will get more of an
Mhm.
answer or get more of a response.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing, though, is there's a lot of kids that are expressing without being asked. So I'll give you an example. When I have, kids come in, they'll say, um, I just don't want to be here anymore. Or life would be so much better if I wasn't here. So they're kind of
Mhm. Mhm.
indirectly, talking about the suicidal thoughts, but they're not saying
Mhm.
I want to kill myself per se. And
Mhm. Mhm.
and just from those kind of statements, we have to say, okay, what is that about? Not freak out, not get all excited, because our
Mhm.
response can definitely cause
Mhm.
more
Mhm.
of an issue. And for some of them, they've been thinking about it for a while. They've been feeling that way for a while, but they just didn't want to. They weren't thinking like, I really want to hurt myself. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't go that far to hurt myself. But based on how I feel about life, I'll be okay if I died. If I got in
Mm-hmm.
an accident, or if something happened to me beyond me doing it to myself. Some kids would say I'm okay with that. And so that kind of goes back to the values,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
what value do they place on life if they're thinking that way? Like you haven't even lived yet. Why are you thinking about this at this age?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of kids are very open about their
Mm-hmm.
thoughts and feelings, and parents' reactions, or the reaction, is so important. I promise you it is, because it can either open the door for conversation and further discussion, or it can shut it down. And so that reaction is so
Open the
important.
door for further discussion or
Right. Right.
that's good. So we have a few questions and comments in here, and thank you for bearing with me with the lag, Mr. Taurus. So let's see. Okay, so I see that Ajada, and I don't know. Well, let's see. Before Ajada, Michelle says, years ago, when I heard of suicide, I would think of a Caucasian person, but not anymore. There's a high rate among African American as well. Is that due to the breakdown in family unit or village? And
Well,
if you're just joining us, we're talking about youth suicide prevention and awareness. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the comment section. I see our question list is growing, and that is good because we want to make sure that Mr. Taurus is able to answer these questions on this evening. So these are some really great questions and comments that I'm seeing here. So, all right, Mr. Taurus. And the question is that shift due to breakdown in family unit or village, or what would you say about that?
so I think it goes back to the values and beliefs that I talked about earlier. But I also have to make this point too. Usually, what happens in, well, I'll just say, the Caucasian culture, eventually will affect the other cultures.
Mm,
However, when it gets to the other cultures, it's more pronounced because numerically we're not the majority. So it's going to look
right,
more of like a problem or an issue. And so when we talk about
right.
statistics, our numbers are higher because it's a smaller pool of people,
Mm-hmm.
versus Caucasians.
Mm-hmm.
It's a spread out pool. So the
Right.
statistically, the numbers are high, but the
Mm-hmm.
the actual numbers are higher. So if that makes
Right.
sense. And so
Yes. Makes
and
a lot of
so we have to put that in context. So when we have issues
sense.
in our community, yes, they're pretty bad because they're going to affect us to a larger degree, because it's concentrated. And so, currently, um, the real big concern is suicide among Black males. That is the trending number right now. It's like really, 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 it's not getting any better. Um, and it's already a challenge getting males into healthcare, and getting them to take care of their needs. So that's something, we got to figure out how to respond to that. um,
Right.
but so that is a point. But it's usually what happens in the Caucasian will end up happening to the other cultures, and we just have to be prepared and be informed. Like, we're not immune to, because we're people. It doesn't matter what color we are, we're still people. And
Right.
we're going to be impacted by other cultures, if we're in the same, you know um, ecosystem, if you will.
Right, 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 right. Okay, thank you. All right, Ajada said, "What are the best practices to be there for a child or adult experiencing suicidal thoughts?" And I think that was one of the things that I was asking it too. I don't know whether we touched on that a little bit because, like you were saying, they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they have there's a difference. And then you also said, I want you to share, there's a difference between a thought And you talked about, can you share that a little bit? There's a difference between a thought and actual behavior, because you said something when we were talking
Yeah.
that if that was the case, all of us at
Right.
one point in time, right? So talk about that a little bit. And then about Ajada's question about if there is a child or adult experiencing suicidal thoughts. That, I think that was one of the questions I had later on, but what would those steps, whatever, be?
Right. I mean, we all have thoughts. Some thoughts we can't control. They pop up, right? What
Mm-hmm.
we do with those thoughts is what really matters. How do we
Mm-hmm.
respond to them? What do we
Mm-hmm.
do with them? Things of that nature. Kids are no different. And so when a child expresses that they're having those thoughts, that's I said that begins the conversation. But that depends on your reaction to what they're sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so in the clinical world, it's okay to have suicidal thoughts. I know that sounds crazy because the thoughts themselves aren't dangerous. So here's the analogy I use. Just think of thoughts as the gun and think of the intent or plan as the bullet.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
just with the gun, with no bullets, there's nothing that's going to happen, right? Unless you're going to hit
Right.
yourself with the gun. But if
Right.
you put the plan and the gun together, that's where it becomes lethal. So when
Mm-hmm.
you have the thoughts with the intent of a specific plan, that's where we really need to be concerned, and that's where really
Mm-hmm.
begin to have these serious interventions, such as hospitalization or making sure that they're
Mm-hmm.
talking to, a healthcare provider, um, and even now in schools, they're really overly cautious. So if a child in school now says, "I'm thinking about harming myself," the guidance counselor say, "Okay." They call mommy and dad and say, "Hey, this person needs to be evaluated before they can come back to school." So I've had several
Mm-hmm.
kids. This is like a regular thing now where I have to meet with them before they can go back to school to say they're safe enough or they're okay enough to do that. So that is some of the other mechanisms that's in place to make sure that we're responding to these issues seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, ideas by themselves aren't necessarily fatal. It's just
Mm-hmm.
when they say, "This is how I want to do it," or "This is how I'm thinking about doing it," that's where we really
Mm-hmm.
be concerned. But with kids, like we should not even delay in the ideas, because we know that the more that lingers, the more that it continues to fester, the ideas begin to expand, and we don't want to normalize that. We don't want to say that's okay,
Mm-hmm.
just have these ideas. Like, no, we need to figure out what's this about, or how, like, what is it that you don't understand about life and understand about your worth and your
Mm-hmm.
value. You know what I mean? Those things
Mm-hmm.
that we need to kind of get into.
Because me being a youth leader, right, Christian youth leader, I began thinking, and I researched even today about like the spirit of suicide, like, and also like and thinking about when it's said about it's impulsive and the emotions and feelings, and I began thinking about thoughts, and there's and I will get on this a little, but the spiritual, my as for me thinking about the spiritual component, I was not almost I was a little angry thinking about, man, hearing that and reading that children that young are dealing with these types of thoughts, and just knowing the spiritual battle that as adults that we have to deal with, just thinking like how there's an all-out attack, even in many aspects on our children. But then as I shared, I started thinking about 2 Timothy 4:5, about casting down, Second Corinthians 10, 4, and 5, casting down strongholds, casting down imaginations, casting down thoughts that are not.
Right.
And so I just believe, and I could be wrong, that there's two sides to it, Taurus, in terms of the practical and also the spiritual as well. I know but that's just my side that I started
Right.
thinking about today, as
Right.
I'm thinking about, man, you know, just that, are they in some type of youth groups? Are they in where they're hearing about how they can cast down, even because first, second grade, third grade, I teach, when I'm teaching, I teach the kids, if you have a thought that's not, that that you're not supposed to be thinking God says, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not lie. If you have any thought, thou shalt not steal. If you having things that are coming up like that, then we need to cast them down. Then I know there's a practical things that has to be done, but does the spiritual play a part in that too? And I think that was Michelle's question: how does spiritual evilness affect suicide attempts, such as music, movies, video games, drugs, alcohol that youth engage in? And that was her question as well. I guess mine would be synonymous in that. Can you touch on? I know we have about 10 more minutes, but can you touch on that a little bit?
Oh, yeah, actually,
Yes,
I mean, you don't even
the
have to,
combination.
yes, you don't even have to go to the music and movies. I mean, that's just the icing on the cake. So
Right.
typically, several years ago, I began to notice this trend within the young peer groups. And I
Mm-hmm.
noticed that there was an increase of people that were self-harm, cutting, and other sort of behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Mm-hmm.
began to ask them, like, hey, where did you learn this? Where did you get this idea? And
Mm-hmm.
it came from one of their friends, a person that they, bonded with, and
Wow.
the friend was depressed and they were always down, and they just talked about, you know, thoughts of not wanting to be here, and how they would get the relief by cutting themselves or harming themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
the person would, just from hearing their peers' story or hearing their situation day in and day out, they
Wow.
would become depressed. They would become down, and then they begin to self-harm, not for their own issues, but because of what
Mm-hmm.
their friend is going
Mm-hmm.
through. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's a similar thing to the music. When you ingest enough in you, it's going to come out of you
Yeah.
some kind of way.
Yeah.
And the spiritual part
Yeah.
is, what are our kids being exposed to? And to be honest with you, we don't really know because we're not there. We don't
Right.
hear every conversation, we don't see every interaction. And that's what they're having to deal with. And they're trying to understand
Yeah.
it, they're trying to deal with it. And sometimes it's hard. And sometimes they don't even have the
Yeah.
language to tell what it is. And so
Right.
that's why we have to be careful that we create an open conversation, that our reaction
Yes.
doesn't shut it down. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes kids will
Mm-hmm.
say things because like they're curious, like they like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't guess like what happened today, or like, can you believe this
Mm-hmm.
this person did
Mm-hmm.
this? And so that's how we get aware as parents, so we can say, oh wow, like let me educate you about this and let me tell you what the real deal is. So I think the
Right.
spiritual part is very important as well, because you know what gets in us is what we it's like faith, right? We get faith by hearing.
Yeah.
So if we hear enough stuff and we see enough stuff, it's going to have an impact. And our
That's
kids are
so
no
good.
different. That's no different.
That's good. That's good. Yes. I just wanted to see like whether, that because I was thinking that today. So thank you for sharing that. All right.
Yeah.
Christina said the kids I had speak with me about this did not feel that their concerns would be taken seriously by their parents. They're young, so they don't have anything to worry about. Um, I guess that goes back to what, if there is, because sometimes, like you said, they might say, let me just see what would happen if I say this.
Hmm.
Hearing somebody else talk about it, let me see you're talking about a kid, right?
Right.
10, 11. And that thought, we know that where that
Right.
negative thought, is coming from, right?
Right.
So they could begin to say, well, let me see what would happen if I say this. And to brush it off as a parent, say, you know better than that. Or as Christina said, they don't have anything to worry about. You won't have anything to worry about. You just a kid. You just a child. You don't have any worries or concerns. Which these thoughts, that's how
Right.
things happen, right? We all know,
Absolutely.
right? Thoughts become our
Absolutely.
actions, right? And so
Absolutely.
that's why we want to make sure that we are attacking as parents. We are getting, and guardians and leaders, that we are getting to the thoughts, right, and helping them with their thoughts. But the only way we can do that, as you said, is encourage that open dialogue where
Right.
they can know that we can have a discussion. It's not going to be a one-sided talk, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
going to be a discussion. And I think that is the shift from old school to new school, where old school, our parents just talk, 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 talk. They just told us and they didn't give us any room. You don't say
Right.
anything, you just listen, right?
Right.
So thank you for sharing that, Christina. Okay, we have how does spirit. Okay, we talked about that. Good info and tips. Hey, Shamika, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Katrina, for joining us. Katrina says, what are some examples of ways for adults to respond Brother Charles, you got to add because that's the question of the day. What to respond when children open up about their thoughts and feelings? We didn't get with that. Are there some steps? Like if someone first hears someone opening up about their thoughts and feelings, what is that protocol? How should give us an example of what that sounds like? Because we've gotten this question 2 or 3 times. So what? Okay, somebody comes and they say,
Yeah.
"Hey, mom, dad, auntie, whoever, I'm thinking about this, or I feel depressed, or I'm feeling really sad. I don't feel like myself." What is the response?
So I think the first response, or usually my first response to clients that come in, is thank you for being bold enough to say something. Like I praise what they did because they cannot feel like it's anything negative about speaking up or speaking out. And so
Mm-hmm.
I create that space to say thank you for sharing this. I know this is hard or difficult or uncomfortable to share, or you're afraid of how someone may react, but you need to share it. You need to get it out. You need to talk it through. And so from there, I began to explore, like, okay, so where did these ideas come from, or what's really making
Where
you
did they
feel
come from?
like? And the other thing is, what is this going to solve? Like you killing
Mm-hmm.
yourself or you thinking about hurting yourself, what is this going to solve? What solution is this going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And most kids are like, well, I just won't be here. Like that's not a solution, and that's going to
Mm-hmm.
affect other
Mm-hmm.
people. Like you're going to hurt other people because you're not here. And you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there, it just kind of it's a leading conversation. But the first thing is to thank them for sharing that, because it's not easy to share that. Thinking about a kid, like you're not talking about toys and
Mm-hmm.
candy. You're talking about life. A kid talking about life and fearful how their
Right.
parents is going to react. So the last thing
Mm-hmm.
you want to do is say something that's going to get their parents to get all riled up. So you got to thank them, say, hey, I'm so glad that you trusted us enough or
Uh-huh.
trusted me
Mm-hmm.
enough to talk about this. So I think that's the first thing, and then just kind of build on the
Mm-hmm.
conversation
Mm-hmm.
from there. But also, do not leave it just to your own parental judgment. I think that is where, if they're not in counseling, like, okay, I think this would be good for you to really talk about these things with somebody else where you can feel more safe and more comfortable, because
Mm-hmm.
there's more to the issue than just a brief conversation. Like there's got to be, like said earlier, there's things that has been feeding this, things,
Mm-hmm.
suggestions and ideas and all sorts of influences,
Right.
and you're not going to get all that in a 10-15 minute conversation. And sometimes kids aren't thinking about that. They're just so
Right.
afraid of, like, how much can I say or how much should I say. That's, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So that's if there's yes, it does. So that's if they actually say that they have that thought. But what if they just say I'm depressed? Or what if they haven't actually voiced which what if they just say I'm feeling really sad, I'm really feeling like really really sad, I'm feeling really depressed, something is really so how do we respond when they open up about those types of feelings? What would be how do we get in to get them to be able to share more?
Okay, so sadness is a feeling, and it is a normal feeling that
Mm-hmm.
we experience at all different points of our life. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not bad to be sad sometimes. Like there's the legitimate and appropriate things to
Mm-hmm.
be sad about, things that
Mm-hmm.
happen
Mm-hmm.
unexpectedly, loss and tragedy. Those are sad things. Depression
Mm-hmm.
is a little different, because to me, depression is more of a behavior that's influenced by certain
Mm-hmm.
feelings. And the behavior is, how does it change from your routine? How is your lifestyle? How is the way of your functioning impaired or hindered, or dramatically has changed to something completely opposite? So when I think of depression, I'm looking at certain behaviors. Feelings are temporary anyway. Sadness, it
That's
comes,
good.
it goes. Happiness, it comes and goes. Joy, it comes and
Mhm,
goes.
mhm,
But when it comes to
mhm,
certain emotions, those are behaviors. Those last longer. Those things tend to, progress sometimes, or sometimes it just lasts a
mhm,
little, and sometimes it
mhm,
wears off.
mhm.
But we have to be
Right.
mindful, that we don't say, "Oh, you shouldn't be sad." Well, you can't help that. Some things
Mm,
are right? So we got to be careful how
Right.
we respond to
Right.
it and say, "Wow, I'm sorry that you're sad," or how can we feel better about whatever the situation is. But we have to be careful how we respond again, to what kids share, and not react in an extreme or an overexcited way. I think keeping the conversation very
Yeah.
calm and just on their level, like, hey, we're having a conversation, and as long as we're having a conversation, then we can work with it. But once the information or the communication kind of ceases, then you kind of left to wonder, like, what else is going on, or what else may be the problem. And you don't have
Right.
to be an expert to have a conversation with your kids. You just got to
That's
make sure
good.
that they feel safe enough to talk about things that it doesn't feel so comfortable
Mm.
to talk about.
I love what you just said. That's a mouthful. That's a word right there, to make sure that they feel safe enough to talk about the things that are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That That's good. That's really good. So I see, if you've joined us and you're just joining us, we're ending our discussion about youth suicide prevention and awareness. This has been a really good discussion. I see that. Thank you so much for the questions. And also we have a suicide hotline text in the chat for anyone that you maybe know. If you have any concerns, or if there's anyone that that's struggling with it, you can call or text 988. Share this video out. I see that Connie says such a necessary discussion. Lady Bilbo, many have had thoughts. Ajada, he touched on this. It was very helpful and insightful. Ideations versus attempts. Charity, talking out our thoughts is so important, which is why our children need to have a voice and a safe place. Right. Lady Bilbo, I was thinking about the same thing, about just the mission of Light It Up TV is to
Hmm.
give them that voice so that they can use their voices, right, in a positive way to impact our schools, communities, and families, right? And so we want to make sure that that voice is them having that safe place to talk about their ideas and their feelings and emotions. And we are in Find Your Voice Fridays, they will get into some of those uncomfortable topics, because that's what the whole purpose is, to give them that place where they can learn how to feel comfortable and then share with their other peers how to feel comfortable. We have one more question, Brother Taurus. I'm saying, brother, you got to talk. One other question, and then from Shamika, and then I want you to be thinking of some last words that you would say to our audience. Okay, so Shamika says, does the lack of mental health awareness or treatment have a lot to do with the rise in suicidal attempts?
So I understand her question. I appreciate it. I don't think it's the matter of awareness anymore. I think it's the matter of seeing the value in it. And
Mm-hmm.
so, actually, mental health means more than just mental.
Mm-hmm.
In the definition in our diagnostic manual, mental health is actually your social, occupational, your
Good.
physical, your spiritual, and your mental. It's
Oh,
all
that's
areas of your
good.
life. Because if you go in a hospital and you're suffering some sort of illness or some sort of pain, you're a mental health patient because you're feeling something about it, right? So
Yeah.
there's other aspects in our life that affect and impact our mental health, as well as our mental health impact our physical health as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
think we got to expand our idea about health overall. It's really about health, and part of that is our mental, but also part of that is making sure we're taking care of our temple. We're taking care of
Totally. Yeah.
other areas of life that require our functioning at our highest capacity.
Yeah.
Um, so,
So good.
so I think that's where it is. We just don't understand, or we're not investing, the value that it
Mm-hmm.
deserves, and that's why we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing the results that we're seeing, and people are struggling because they just didn't put in or they didn't see the worth in it.
Yeah. One something just came up. Thank Shamika said thanks for sharing that point.
Absolutely.
Something just came up in my to mind, and I want you to touch on this as you give your last words. You shared something that you said there, that because I asked you, have you seen children before with that? And you said yes. Talk about the child, about the pressure that said, and what they opened up and said, that the pressure to excel, and that balance between pushing our children to excel, but giving them space to be human, right? So can you
Yeah.
touch on that as as you're closing out? Yeah.
Yeah, there have been so many kids that I've seen that are like exceptionally intelligent, and they struggle with the pressure of performing almost to the point where they're striving to be perfect. And the goal of that is really to please or to gain acceptance or love and validation, from people, praising their accomplishments. And it's not about them as a human being, it's about a human doing. And they have to continue doing things, and they have to continue doing things at such an exceptional or perfect level. And we all know that's impossible. But for kids,
Yeah.
they're young and they got endurance. But at some point they're gonna get exhausted, they're gonna get frustrated, and they're gonna say, this isn't even working. This isn't even producing what I thought it would. And it's like, well, there's nothing else I can do. And so that's kind of how that hopelessness builds in. But there's a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
that these young people feel that their responsibility is to please their parents. And I am the first to tell them, like, no, that is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to live your life, and your parents will help you with that. But you should not live your life based on what your parents say you should do. They have their life to live. And I think that's where we need to be very intentional with our kids because of our own neglect in our childhoods. We put a lot of things on our kids, and it's with the best intentions, but it does not cause the best results. And it steers
Yeah.
our kids from being creative, being authentic, and really tapping into their true identity. And by the time they figure it out, they're in their 30s or 40s, like realizing like I this isn't the life I chose. This isn't the life that I wanted for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that's part of what the kids are, experiencing today. And because we're offering all these resources that we didn't have as kids, from our parents, like financially, all these opportunities, and that's a lot of pressure. And none of that is really about them being a kid. It's about them performing to be this great adult or this great person in adulthood. For what? For what? So I think we need
Yeah.
to be very careful of where we are pushing our kids and how far we're pushing our kids. And is it really something they're interested in doing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good. I just wanted, that was one of the things that stuck out to me in the conversation where you said the child said, when they thought, they came to you and said that they didn't feel like wanted to be here, and you asked why, and you said, they were trying to please their parent. Like,
Yeah.
I want to do, yeah. And so, yeah, that was something that just stuck out. You all, thank you all so much. What are your last words for us, Taurus?
I want to make sure that we don't think of suicide as this horrific thing that we got to be so scared and timid about confronting. This is just another aspect of life that we can overcome because we have the tools, we have the
Mm-hmm.
knowledge, but we
Mm-hmm.
just don't boldly confront these things. We don't talk about the things that are uncomfortable to talk about. And I got to encourage people, unfortunately, because it's become such a popular or more prolific thing, and
Mm-hmm.
we know this in history. The more we tolerate things, the less we can change it. And so we
Mm-hmm.
don't want to act like we're tolerating suicide or this is such a common thing, like mass shootings. Like we don't even flinch anymore when it comes to mass shootings.
Right.
So we don't want to do that with all
Right.
these other areas that are really hurting us, as a people.
Yeah.
Um, and we got to do better. I mean, we really got to do better.
Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing awareness. Our hashtag is not going to be anything with suicide. It's youth life awareness. Okay. Youth life awareness is what we're saying. Youth life, hashtag youth life awareness. Thank you all so much. If you can just drop that in there, hashtag Youth Life Awareness. Yes, I see as we are closing out. Thank you so much. If you need to reach out to Mr. Taurus, is Integrity Counseling and Wellness. He shared a wealth of information with us. Yes, we've got to do better. Oh, I love that. Melinda said hashtag we got to do better. I like that too. Let's hashtag we got to do better. That's right. Shamika says she can remember like feeling like she had to be her absolute best as a child. So she said that was good. So thank you, Youth Life Awareness. I love that. Thank you so much. If share this video out, you never know who this would help. Share the
Absolutely.
video out, and don't forget to subscribe. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then also look for our kids on this Friday for Find Your Voice Fridays. That's what we're talking about, giving them that voice. Our new episode on Friday, September 27th. All right, that's it, guys. Thank you so much. Until next time, remember to light it up.